So it looks like one of the biggest speculations of 2024 is going to come to an end tomorrow. At least that's what my sources are telling me. No, I mean, I say I've got sources. My source is a guy that's been working in Formula 1 for about 30 years, and his source is somebody on the inside. I'm not one of these YouTubers that claims to have sources, and that source is just, trust me, bro. I'll leave it to you to decide which YouTuber I'm talking about with that, but it could be anybody. Who knows? I don't watch any of these other channels, so I am probably just unintentionally roasting someone here. Adrian Newey is set to be formally announced by Aston Martin tomorrow, so the 10th of September 2024, which brings to an end months of speculation as to where the 65-year-old will continue his absolutely insane design career, if indeed he was going to carry on at all, because it would have been a great opportunity for the man to walk away and enjoy some time on his yacht. Because that man likes his boats, apparently. And if I just bought a massive boat and left it moored in the Mediterranean, I'd want to have a go in it from time to time as well. On it from time to time. But I can't stand deep water, so I don't. Newey's career future was a bit all over the place since the shock news of him departing Red Bull was announced back at the end of April or the beginning of May this year. The announcement of his departure in the first quarter of 2024 immediately led to a raft of teams chasing his signature, the one most hotly tipped to sign him being Ferrari, as they just signed Hamilton, and a pairing of the greatest designer and, statistically, the greatest driver together. That would be a dream come true for Ferrari, the Tifosi, and everybody associated with that team. The rumours and speculations surrounding that potential move led to my greatest video title ever. So you've got Adrian Newey, Lewis Hamilton, so Newey, Lewis, and the news. Newey, Lewis, and the news. That's the power of pun. But yeah, how did Ferrari lose out on Newey, and why did he decide to go house hunting in the Cotswolds rather than northern Italy? It is in northern Italy, isn't it, Maranello? The Italian media has claimed that Newey would have been more of a consultant at Ferrari rather than being hands-on in the actual development of the car, and his deal would have seen him stay in England rather than moving to Italy to be closer to the factory. Whether Newey would have worked in a role similar to how John Barnard used to, with Barnard working out of an office in Guildford and then occasionally popping into the factory, or just being on the end of the phone to answer technical questions, remains to be seen. But whatever the plan Ferrari had, I don't think Newey wanted to be sat in England designing from afar. If he was at Maranello, he'd probably be able to drop in and make sure his ideas are being applied to the car as they should be. On the 4th of September this year, Autosport reported that Ferrari also didn't want to enter any kind of bidding war for Newey's signature, despite the budget being allocated to get him. If Ferrari was going to get Newey, it was to be done with the offer that they were offering, and any budging on that was going to be very reluctant or a simple take it or leave it kind of deal. So the second somebody else came in offering more money, Ferrari was off the table. But that's not to say that the whole thing was completely about the size of the pay packet, because somebody as successful and as good as Newey is has the power to be able to demand certain working conditions. As already mentioned, he's not exactly going to want to work out of an office nearly 1,000 miles and a 17-hour drive away, and if you want to get the most out of his job, he's going to have to be there to do the work he needs to get done. Throw in the fact that Eddie Jordan is Newey's manager, F1's king of the wheeling and dealing is going to know more than enough to secure the best deal for his client. So enter Aston Martin. Lawrence Stroll didn't exactly just go in for Newey as soon as the news broke that he was leaving Red Bull. In fact, Stroll and Newey have been having chats for ages, and Newey has worked with Aston Martin before as he worked on the Valkyrie in a joint project between Aston and Red Bull back in around 2015, 2016 or so, with the car entering production back in 2021, just a year or so after Stroll and his consortium of businesses bought into Aston Martin. With Aston also entering the WEC's Hypercar and IMSA's GTP classes next year, it makes sense for Newey to be able to contribute to a car that's already got his name on it. Because this is the thing, for all the stuff that Stroll gets thrown at him, he's actually got a vision for the brand. The factory that is literally across the road from the Silverstone circuit has been a building site for the last couple of years, with Stroll investing heavily in the team to bring it forward up the grid. They've had a new wind tunnel built, the factory has expanded, and while I have driven past the factory a couple of times on the way out of Silverstone, once for a track day with Radical and twice while working for the R-Factor 2 esports stuff, there's too many trees in the way to get a good look at what's going on. But it's cool to see, especially when you consider that all of that used to belong to Newey's manager, Eddie Jordan. Aston is going to have a Works Honda power unit in 2026. They will also have Newey unless something goes horrifically wrong in the next 24 hours. They will also have budget that will be more than enough, And they will also be enjoying the services of Dan Fallows, who worked with Newey at Red Bull, Enrico Cardilli, who was Ferrari's head of aerodynamics and also the vehicle project manager, and they've also secured the services of Andy Cowell, who was Mercedes engine maestro during the Hamilton dominance years. As a base package, Aston has almost got everything they would possibly need to get further up the grid. Almost. As one of the comment sections has pointed out, you can have the latest and greatest and all that money and still not get the most out of it, and I think I've covered the main culprits of this in some of my more historical videos. Toyota, spending billions for only a couple of glory run pole positions and no wins to show for it. Jaguar, who flopped partly because Ford simply didn't give a hoot and there was politics happening in there too, involving Niki Lauda, Bobby Rahal and others, and Newey almost joined them before the talks broke down, after which it became Red Bull, and he went there anyway. And then there's Renault/Alpine, a team that is having its engine department workers planning a strike because the team wants to pull out of Formula 1, at least on the engine front. Again. Renault being in Formula 1, out of Formula 1, back in Formula 1 again. It's the on-again, off-again relationship that hasn't been seen since Robin and Ted in How I Met Your Mother. But Jaguar and Toyota at the very least serve as warnings from history. You can have it all, but if the working environment isn't one that allows all the team to work as, well, a team, then you're going to get nothing done. In that video I did on Jaguar, someone who commented was somebody who had worked for Stewart and then Jaguar, and said that the environment changed almost overnight. It went from being a family operation and had a very family atmosphere to it, to being a very corporate and stale one. But there's one other thing that does need mentioning here, and it involves going back to Toyota for a minute. Toyota was famous for spending billions and getting nothing. But they also had incredibly odd driver pairings. The first pairing they had was in 2002, Mika Salo and Alan McNish, with McNish being signed up as, at the time, one of the best drivers in the world to have not been involved in Formula 1. The following year, the driver pairing was Olivier Panis and Cristiano De Matta. One driver at the end of his career and not the same driver he had been after that horrendous Canadian Grand Prix accident in 1997, and the other driver had just won the Dying Kart series in a Toyota-powered car, so it was almost a marketing thing. So fast forward to 2004 and Toyota has 4 drivers. De Matta, who did the first 12 rounds of the season before being replaced by Ricardo Zonta, and then Panis, who raced for the team up to the penultimate round of the season before being replaced by Trulli. Now Trulli was a solid mid-grid driver, but the appointment confusion was further compounded in 2005. Toyota signed Ralf Schumacher to a big money deal. A deal that was so big many at the time joked that Toyota must have had a massive brain fade and thought they were signing the other Schumacher. While Toyota did start making the podium more often in 2005, helped in part due to the Michelin tyres being better than the Bridgestones that year, they were still spending obscene amounts of money for very little return, and then decided to dump Michelin for Bridgestone in 2006, and ended up going backwards because the car was an evolution of the 2005 car that was designed for French rubber and not Japanese rubber. And they sacked people who dared go against the Toyota way, as Mike Gascoigne will attest. Put simply, Toyota had the money to be able to sign better drivers. They should have signed better drivers. They should have picked up at least one star driver with all of that money available to spend. But they didn't. And that's kind of the problem that Aston Martin is in at the minute. Now, before people get upset, nothing I'm about to say is a personal attack. Let me say that again very, very clearly. Nothing I'm about to say is a personal attack. Seriously, not every criticism of your driver is an attack, nor does it mean I'm a hater. If a driver makes a bonehead move, I'm going to say it was a bonehead move. If I say a driver isn't performing to the ability that we expect from a particular driver and that he's fallen off a cliff, I'm going to say that that driver isn't performing and has fallen off a cliff. That last bit goes out primarily to those who got upset about the Daniel Ricciardo video I did a few months ago, the one about him potentially losing his V-carb seat. The stuff that people say is just... like, are people for real? But anyway, Aston Martin has got 2 drivers who might need some re-evaluation. If you are a die-hard Fernando Alonso fan, you are probably licking your lips over this. Adrian Newey and Fernando Alonso. The crossover you've probably been wanting for the last 15 years. A guy who knows what he's doing when it comes to designing a car, and a guy who has been repeatedly called the best driver of his generation. A generation that included Jenson Button, Felipe Massa and Kimi Raikkonen. That's decent company. 2 of those drivers also became world champion, and the third almost became a world champion. But the fact of the matter is, when Newey properly gets to work during 2025, he'll be working on the 2025 car and getting that upgraded. It won't be until 2026 that the car will be his, for want of a better phrase. Same way that Newey had inputs on the 1997 McLaren, even though he really shouldn't have done given that he was on gardening leave, and it was 1998 that was his first McLaren with his name on it. Anyway, with all those thoughts in mind, in 2026 Alonso is going to be 45 years old at the end of that season when his contract expires. Will he stay on after that, or will he walk away from Formula 1 for good at that point? And then there's the other driver, Lance, the boss's son. Lance has had flashes of brilliance. He got a podium at Baku in 2017, he's been on the podium a couple of times since, and that drive at Turkey in 2020 was pretty damn good. But I will say this about him, the same thing I've said about other drivers that have had that odd holy moly what a drive thing going on. World class on your day does not make you world class. For as long as Lance wants to race in Formula 1, that seat is pretty much his, but I guess that might depend on how serious Stroll Sr is about his team and how far he wants it to progress. At some point he might have to say, sorry kid, but your teammate is finishing 3rd and 4th every race and you're finishing 12th. I can't win a championship like this. But there is a seat in the hypercar. So does this mean in 2026 we'll finally see Drugovich in a Formula 1 car and maybe have Max Verstappen as his teammate? Answers on a postcard, please. So is this a loss for Ferrari? I would actually say so. They could have had Newey and Hamilton, and Newey had expressed a desire to work with Lewis before they both called time on their careers. But I can understand why Newey decided not to go there, because of how other things had gone with the teams he's already worked with. Late in house / March, he'd come up with a great design, but it didn't really work out because the budget wasn't there. At the same time, those at the top thought his 1988 car, which was aerodynamically sound, was a fluke, given how bad the next cars were. But they were bad because the wind tunnel that had been used to test those future cars hadn't got a flat surface to work on, so the car's aero had been designed for a bowed road, not a flat one. Then Akira Akagi, the owner of Leighton House, ended up under investigation by the police, and the purse strings tightened with the new team bosses, with the new bosses thinking that the problem was Newey, not the iffy wind tunnel in Southampton that they were using. After that, he went to Williams, where he was coming up with some great designs, but as time went on, he wanted to have more of a say in things, such as who Frank chose as drivers, something that Frank went behind his back with when he signed Jacques Villeneuve, doing so while Adrian was on holiday, and that pissed Adrian off, but Frank apologised and said it wouldn't happen again. But it did happen again, and that was when Frentzen was signed for 1997, meaning that Damon Hill lost his drive at the end of 1996 and Newey quit the team. There was also going to be no chance of career progression at Williams, with Patrick Head being a part owner of the team. Moving on to McLaren, he got chewed out almost instantly by Ron Dennis because he dared to add some colour to his office, and that's a story I enjoy greatly. And in 2000, the relationship soured when Dennis said to Newey and to Martin Whitmarsh, I want you two to run the team when I'm done. Newey quite rightly asked, well, when's that? Oh, I can't put a timescale on that. And Newey replied with, I'm not going to sit around waiting for you to retire, which Newey said sent a chill through the room. After this, Ron set up a new management structure, and it wasn't an environment where Adrian could flourish. There was also the arguments over the MP4-18, and at the insistence of David Coulthard, Red Bull signed him up, and he's been at Red Bull since. Well, up until about 5 or 6 months ago, that is. He is still working for Red Bull, but he's working on that hypercar thing that they've got going on and not actually at the Formula 1 team. He's going to be leaving all of that at the end of the year or the first quarter of next year to then join Aston Martin. So all of that out of the way, this then leads back to Ferrari. Ferrari has its own culture, and it's quite stuck in that way. The way that Ferrari works probably isn't compatible with how Newey wants to work. And after leaving all of his previous teams because of disagreements with those above him, or not wishing to be involved in the team's BS behind the scenes, as seen with this so-called power struggle at Red Bull, he's off somewhere new. I'm guessing that Papa Stroll is going to be less, hey guys, what you up to, than he has been before, and this has been a cause for complaint over the last couple of years. Reports say that he was in the factory 2 to 3 times a week when he initially bought Force India, compared to Vijay Mallya's 5 times a year, but apparently he's been a bit too hands-on with the whole running of things, which has kind of stopped the team from doing what they need to get done rather than what Lawrence wants them to get done. And I want Aston to do well, I really do. I like Aston Martins anyway. I think the Valkyrie is an absolute monster, and I'll probably be following Aston across the WEC and IMSA next year. But I do think that the Newey appointment will have to come with some patience. Just because Newey is arriving doesn't mean that they'll win races immediately. Newey isn't some God mode cheat code. While he did win many titles at Williams and Red Bull, his cars won just one Constructors' Championship at McLaren. And he also went on a 7-year dry spell with Red Bull when Mercedes was dominating. It also doesn't mean that Alonso is guaranteed the 2026 championship. If it's the engine-based formula people are claiming, then it's going to mean that Newey will have to come up with something different for those particular regulations. But who knows at this point? It's a new start for one person, it's a step forward for the team that person is joining, and hopefully that team will make its way forward and into positions where they can be challenging for wins. I mean, who knows? But after 2026, Aston Martin is definitely going to have to look at getting some new drivers. Some star drivers, maybe, because Alonso can't carry that team forever. But I'd like to know what you think. Get into the comments and get an old discussion going. So then, some opinions and reaction to the news that Newey is set to sign for Aston Martin tomorrow. If this thing has made you think things about the thing, then like this thing so I know I've done a good job. And for more things from this channel, click the subscribe button thing and get the bell thing on too, so you never miss out on anything that I do around here. Massive thanks as ever to the mad lads at Patreon that support me at a more personal level, and if you want to help out with paying the bills around here, a link to Patreon is in the description, along with links to Discord, socials, affiliates and other bits and bobs you might want or need to know. Well, there's super thanks down there if you just want to refill my coffee cup in time for the next video, and memberships if you want to help but Patreon is a little bit too scary. So until next time, I've been AdmiralLaWind, have a great day wherever you are, and goodbye.